Culin and Danielle, welcome to the REI Diamond Show. How are you doing today?
We're awesome. Thank you
Terrific.
for
Thanks for
having
having
us.
us.
Sweet. Yeah. So for the listeners who don't know, we're on the video call and you can see the host coach neon sign in the background. That is Danielle and Cullen's hosting company. They have 10 short-term rentals that they have operated at what is an above average performance rate compared to what most people probably get out of their short-term rentals. Soon to be 11. They've been doing this since 2018 and have written the book, which I believe is also called Host Coach as well.
Ta-da.
Plug for the book. Cool. Welcome to the show. Do you guys want to share the backstory? How did you end up doing this, starting in 2018? And maybe what's the business model look like today?
Yeah. Excellent question. Started real estate the way a lot of people do, kind of by accident, meaning that in 2018, I've always been a serial entrepreneur. I've had many startups. And in 2018, I was part of a startup that would basically shut down shop. And was kind of looking at my life thinking, I've got a 8-year-old son. Am I going to really go? What's the effort level look like starting another startup, right? And everybody that's done that knows, the grind involved. And we had one short-term rental at the time. And it was, a sideline kind of thing, but it was doing $4,000 a month or so in gross revenue. And I thought, I've always been kind of excited and interested in real estate. I could do easy math and I can multiply 4 times 2 or 3 and start to see some scale there.
And then doing what we do best, we iterated and used all of our background from having various tech companies separately and together and really started to dig into how do you make this perform? Once we had a couple, we accidentally bought 3 from different people simultaneously. So we had enough to test some theories and really start to manipulate how we were presenting things and work on the Airbnb algorithm to be at 97% occupancy year round.
Nice. 97% occupancy. So let's go back to the first one. How did you end up buying that one? Why did you buy that? And maybe where is that located?
Well, really, the very first was what a condo we bought in Turks and Caicos, and that was just bought as a lifestyle investment.
It's my happy place.
The second property, number 2, was also maybe a lifestyle investment. It was that first cabin. When we got serious in 2018, we basically bought an MLS deal, talked to that owner who owned a second, so bought an off-market deal, and was contacted by a wholesaler. This is kind of a fun story. A wholesaler had reached out to us attempting to buy
our first cabin, which was Cullen's fishing cabin.
And I kind of picked up from that, his vibe. This guy's a wholesaler. So I called him back and said, we're not selling, but we'd be open to be an investor, a buyer. And within a couple of weeks, he had found a really ideal property for us. So there in 2018, we did an MLS, an off market, and a wholesale buy.
And where were these at?
So we operate primarily in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah Valley, central mountains of Virginia.
Anywhere near and around Skyline Drive.
And that doesn't mean much to me. What is that? Why is that exciting? Why do people vacation there, Danielle?
It's a beautiful place. So Cullen went for fly fishing, but there's the Luray Caverns, which was one of the largest caverns that you can explore on the East Coast. There's the Shenandoah River. There's a series of national parks. There's this Skyline Drive is this drive that right about now, anytime through fall, is one of the most stunning ways to appreciate autumn colors in the area.
And that's just really because we're here in the DC area. So it's a getaway zone for the DC area. You're in Chicago. Your listeners are in other major metropolitan areas. What we teach in our investment thesis is within 2 to 3 hours driving distance from any major metropolitan area, there's places where people want to get away, right? Maybe it's a national park. Maybe it's a lake area, a winery area, skiing, those places exist, in the outlying areas of every major metropolitan area.
And that's where you should invest.
Okay. So why? Is it important because you're driving out there and enjoying it yourself as a second home? Is it the fact that in case something happens, you're hopping in the car? Like what other reasons why the 2 to 3 hour drive radius is part of the investment philosophy?
There's multiple prongs. First of all, if you find an area that you're passionate about, you're going to be a much better host because you're almost a concierge. I love when guests are saying, I'm planning to get engaged. Is there a place that's really pretty? I'm like, go to Kennedy's Peak. There's a perfect overlook. Here's a photographer. I love that component. And if you're unfamiliar with the area, it's the impetus to go do a little traveling. The other thing is we want maximum return on our investment. So we don't want to pay city prices for real estate. So if you go out into rural communities, the price per square foot is usually dramatically lower. But when you repurpose something that's been a getaway cabin into a high volume short term rental, you can have amazing cash flow out of it.
And guests are looking for an experience they don't have in their own home, in their own city, right? So they're looking to get out, and particularly post COVID, right? So many people are working from home and realizing they don't have to work from their
Home.
condo in downtown, and they can get out into nature and experience something different.
Yeah. Work your 9 to 5 and then hike and sit in the sauna or the hot tub afterwards.
Nice. What I have one in Florida. I bought it because I wanted a second home, and I only put it on Airbnb because I don't want to have to like pay someone to go by there, do the grass. And I kind of like the idea that someone's in there flushing the toilets, keeping the water running, that kind of thing. So it's not really driven by the ROI so much. Luckily, the hurricane went straight over the house, and I happened to buy in this neighborhood that's like in the woods, sort of, very close to the water. We have like alligator fences around the neighborhood and
Gosh.
stuff when I got there. So I'm really happy that it's, I don't want to say hurricane proof, but this little like nook has wind protection and then is far enough where the swells haven't flooded our house. So luckily for that. But that's 20 hours or so away from Chicago. It's not within driving distance, but we want to be able to go there during the winter. I don't think that I just described the right reasons or the right way to look at the property. Is there a way for a person considering a short-term rental to start to kind of put the lens on? Is it 2 to 3 hours away? Here's where people vacation. Purchase price of this, or do I come up with my budget first, or is this, how do I go about trying to like map out that first short-term rental?
Let me hop in with a quick what not to do. Please do not Google top Airbnb destinations, top Airbnb investment areas, because all of them are saturated. Sure, you could buy a place there and probably do okay, but you're not going to be able to maximize revenue in comparison to some place that is an emerging market.
Right. So we call it finding your where. It starts with a brainstorming. Where do people in my area like to go to get away for a weekend? Where would they, take a long weekend, a 3-day weekend, a romantic getaway? Where would they like to go? And then we can start to layer in some of the data, right? So is that going to be a good, ROI returning market? And there's a tool that we use that's available to everyone. It's called AirDNA. It's free. And you can plug in the name of that little town that's, that little winery town or that state park town. And it's going to give you market data. It's going to give you a score on investability, which is that price per square foot compared to the average daily rate. It's going to give you occupancy rates. It's going to give you regulation information. Really, that is the place to start analyzing a market that you might be interested in. You might have 2 or 3 in mind, and you can go to AirDNA and check that out and understand some of that. Start building the numbers.
Yeah, because there's nuance, right? I would have thought we have this 5-bedroom, 3-bath house in Florida now. And we get the summertime vacationers from Central Florida who want to come to the beach and do their week, 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is. They pay more rate because it's a large house with 5 bedrooms. But it wasn't until I've owned that house for 2 years I had the revelation of, well, actually a lot of Florida is much better for 2 or 3 bedroom houses that are even closer to the beach, because it's like an older couple with no kids who's coming down from Canada, and that's like the bulk of the winter season. Like the kids are in school all winter long, so you're not going to get like the snowbird couple to the 5-bedroom house. It's not actually that great of a product. Can you speak to how important it is to match maybe the size, the beds and baths and amenities of a property to the area, and how to identify that?
Absolutely. So I'll talk about the size first. The really sweet spot for getting started, right? If you already have that 5-bedroom, great.
Use what you
Everything,
got.
use what you got, right? But 2 and 3 bedrooms is really a sweet spot. 1 bedroom, the problem with a 1 bedroom is you're doing just as much work, overhead for accepting that guest and maintaining, communications with that guest, et cetera, as you would be, a larger party. So, mom, dad, and 2 kids. So you can actually charge per guest fees on Airbnb. So you can have a base rate and then plus, say, $20 a night for each additional guest. And then the problem with the 4 and 5 bedrooms is a couple just doesn't, as you said, a couple just doesn't rent a 4 bedroom. It's just kind of awkward, right? So 2 and 3 bedrooms, you really get the couples, you get the friend groups, and you get the family.
Okay. How important is it to go for more than 1 bathroom, in your opinion?
Not very. So we
Really?
we have a number of places that have just 1 bedroom.
The majority of our
bathroom.
stays are 2 to 3 days.
Right.
And
Okay.
most people are outside hiking, they are exploring, they're skiing, they're doing all these different things. So we have multiple places that only have 1 bathroom. If I get to pick, I think 2 is better, but I'm also a woman.
And then Dave asked about the
and you asked about amenities. Yeah. So we talk a lot about macro and micro amenities. So as you're evaluating properties, macro amenities are really the big things that are aspirational, that people in apartments, people in homes, people downtown don't have. Things like a beautiful view, access to the water, whether it's the beach, lake, river, whatever. Fireplaces are a big one. Saunas, decks, wraparound decks, screen porches. So those are big macro amenities that people are looking for and want to have. And on the micro amenity sides, that's more stuff you can add on. Sometimes it conveys like a fire pit, big game area, that sort of a thing. Hanging basket chairs are a favorite. We actually have statistical data that if you have a hanging basket chair showing as one of your primary listing photos, you will have a higher conversion rate.
And pet friendly.
And being pet friendly.
Pet friendly.
Right.
That is hilarious. I have a manager who handles all mine. They did the entire outfitting, and we have the game room. We have the theater room. We have a little slide in one of the bedrooms for little kids to come off of the 4 bunk beds that are built in the kids' suite. And we have the hanging basket chair.
I'm like, you're killing it.
Your manager knows what they're doing.
Chair? Like, is it that interesting? Like, it's odd. And it's like one of the first pictures too.
You just got to stand out a little bit, Airbnb, if you put in whatever town, is going to have 500 listings, right? So what are you doing to stand out, and jump off the page for that guest? One little thing. And it can be as little as, oh, look, they've got a slide on their bunk bed.
Or a hanging basket chair overlooking interlocking mountain ranges, like the view plus the floating chair plus the fire table, all of that. Fun. That's you want people to say, I need to stay there. I don't care how much it is.
It's an experience.
So I had Scott Shatford. Do you guys know that name?
Yes. I'm trying to place it.
Yep. So Scott came on the show on October 19th, 2018. Scott is, I believe he's the founder of AirDNA, if I'm not mistaken. So it was like kind of brand new and everything. And if you go back and listen to that episode, we were talking about back then the amenities and these different packages like weren't all super important. He's like, hey, the highest performing properties are a lot more about location. And he's like, you'd be amazed. They're like kind of dated houses, but they're whatever it was, Northwest Washington and all the hiking and all those kind of things. He's like, but they're not like fully renovated. They just have the coffee maker and this and this and this. And things have dramatically changed since that point, huh?
Yes. We're calling it the new era of Airbnb investing. You can no longer just set it and forget it. There's a much higher level of customer demand for experience and excellence. And as long as you can lean into it and embrace it, you're going to do amazing.
Yeah, so many hosts, there's been such a boom in the usership, right? The travelers using Airbnb, and it's no longer about getting a cheap place. It's about having a really amazing experience somewhere that you can't have at home. And so guests have become, rightfully so, more discerning. So, there isn't an amenities arms race going on, and there's also a professional host. There's a lot of hosts, people probably listening to this or heard in the media, people are turning away from Airbnb, people are selling their properties that were short-term rentals. There's an age of professionalism that's making it is elevating, the experience for the guest, but hosts need to kind of keep up with the times and elevate their game as well.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of technical integration that you can do to help with that.
Yeah.
It's not all on your shoulders.
Yeah, it's interesting the arms race that you described, the age of professionalism. Just last night, we were having a team dinner, and the vice president of our organization here in Chicago is showing me he's excited, he's enthusiastic, he's stepping up to the plate to stay in this Orlando house that looks like it's brand new construction and was very likely built with the full intention of being a short-term rental from the beginning. So this thing's got to be like 6,000 square feet. I don't know, 5, 6, 7, tons of bedrooms. It's got the Jurassic Park themed. There's a Jeep in there. The Jeep is the bed, and it's a Jurassic Park themed kids bedroom. The gaming rooms are like, I feel so pathetic thinking about mine. And we spent a fortune building mine out. It was great. It still is great, but man, it doesn't even compare to this extravagant place that he really stepped up to the plate. It's not cheap. This is probably the highest end Airbnb that I've seen, that I know someone who's actually going to live there, so it just speaks to that progression of hosts having to outdo each other for the experience and for the amenities. And I'm curious, in your 2 to 3 hour radius and your drive time, it's really hard to compete with a wraparound porch this time of year. We're recording it in late October, and the trees are, I'm sure, amazing out there in the woods in Virginia and a lot of other places in the country. How much do you think that will become headwind and a challenge in your own portfolio versus there's probably still a lot of runway because it's more about the hiking and the woods and kind of those things, right? Where Orlando is like, there's so much land, they could just keep building, and it's like 100%. We're at, I forget the theme park that's down there. Is it
Disney, one of the Disney.
Yeah, Disney, and there's one on Universal Studios, right? So you kind of have that theme. You have like an exorbitant amount of money going there, where maybe the amenities are much more important in certain markets like that, and that race is going to be more of a risk factor for Airbnb investors versus maybe selecting that weekend getaway. We don't have to set aside $100,000 to build out this like kind of over the top experience for the guests. So like, how do you view that risk profile?
I think the nice thing is there isn't just one guest avatar. Like, not everyone wants to stay in a mega mansion that's themed. Lots of people do. I wouldn't. I would say I would go with someone because I think it would be fun, but understanding where your location that you're investing in, what kind of person is attracted to that, can really help you dial in on what would be important to that person. So for us, obviously views. How many decks have we built at this point?
Many.
Like 5 or 6 decks. They
Nice.
come with decks. We just keep building decks. We add in saunas and hot tubs, that sort of a thing. But that's what, if you think about it, if you've been outside all day, you've been hiking all day, what do you want to do? You want to relax. And if you're an outdoors person, you want to relax outside in a sauna or a hot tub and continue that experience.
And the property is just the first step, right? Where a lot of people, short-term rentals are really 3 things. It's the real estate, 2, it's hospitality, and the third arm is e-commerce. So, the real estate, yes, we're going to try to buy the best property we can, but that's only really the first step. Operationally is where most hosts start to go wrong. And the way that the biggest piece of that is pricing, right? So, we could sell anything at, at the right price, right? So the trick becomes, how do we maximize that revenue, and how do we maximize occupancy? We only get paid when, someone chooses to stay in our place. And there's a software called Price Labs that is a third-party dynamic pricing software. It's an add-on. They get their data directly from Airbnb's API. In this software, you set a base rate, call it $200 a night. And it knows specifically the demand, how many people are searching for, next Friday night or next Tuesday night, or the Tuesday night that the Taylor Swift concert's coming into town. It has that demand data and automatically turns your price up or down to maximize your occupancy.
So, for example, we have a cabin. Actually, most of our cabins are on top of a mountain, but our largest, like 4 bedroom, is on top of a mountain. And there was a weekend
Really bad.
that instead of being a couple $100, it was like $900 a night, and it booked. And we're like, what happened? What don't we know about? And there was a university graduation. We didn't know.
Wow.
The price labs saw the demand for that weekend and just cranked the rate to match the demand. And so it's a great way to maximize revenue while you're sleeping.
And for your listeners, take note of this. If you're, considering an Airbnb investment, or if you have one, 95% of people aren't using a dynamic pricing model. And so what they're doing is they're picking that $200 a night and putting it across every night on their calendar, and all their weekends sell out real quick, where they've now left money on the table, and then their weekdays go mostly vacant. And that's why we see this like market over market over market. You could pick, a dozen markets, out of a hat, and they all kind of running at about 50% occupancy at an average, across the market. And so we, using tools like Price Labs, if you can strive for 70, 80, 90, 95% occupancy, that's where the real money is to be made. Additionally, we have to think about Airbnb as an algorithm, right? If there's 500 listings, how do they decide which listing to put on page one? There's only 18 spots on page one. How do they make that decision? And so their algorithm is working, for the benefit of the company. What does Airbnb as a company care about? Guest satisfaction, right? Is if you delivered a 5-star experience, and revenue. So Airbnb makes their revenue on a cut from paid by the host, shared between the host and the guest, as a service fee. And so if your property's vacant half the time versus a property that's sells, meets the market at the right price every day, you're going to be at the top of that list instead of the bottom of that list.
Which then helps you book more frequently. This is beautiful feedback loop that if you feed the algorithm keeps you at the top. People don't scroll past the first page. I mean, think about it. When you're Googling for information, how often do you go to page 2 or even page 3 of results? So it's critical to be on that first page, one of those top 18 listings.
So along the lines of how we maximize revenue, which was something you just mentioned, we have an awareness of Airbnb's algorithm. And one of the ways that we can drive the algorithm in our favor is occupancy. Another is 5-star reviews. Are there any others that you know of?
There's 100 little ones, right? But it breaks down to those two categories. One, guest satisfaction. So there's lots of things that go into guest satisfaction: reviews, wish list additions,
Instant booking.
Instant booking is a feature, within the settings of Airbnb, your cancellation policy,
Being pet friendly.
all those little things. But if you just look at it through the lens of all these decisions that you're making, what is going to be best for the guest that I can tolerate, right? Like I mentioned, pets. Guests love to bring their pets, but not every place is suitable for a pet, right? But if you can, and a lot of people are on the fence, but if you can look at it through that lens of what is the customer, the future potential guest is the official term, looking for, they want to bring their pet. So if you're just on the fence about it and you look at it through that lens, you'll make the decision, okay, I guess I should be pet friendly.
Because there's a deficit. There are more people who want to travel with their pets than there are pet friendly Airbnbs. So it's a demand issue. So by making something pet friendly, all of a sudden you're appealing to a much larger audience.
It makes sense. So aside from the algorithm, what else do we do to maximize revenue? Maybe we could touch on your philosophy when it comes to outsourced professional management versus commitment to do it yourself as the owner.
There's this great client of mine. There's a Spanish expression, and it goes something like, "No one fattens the bull like its owner," and it's applicable here. I'm not a fan of using management companies. I mean, it can be done. I would actually prefer to recommend people to use a co-host than a big management company, because they just don't have the eye on the ball. Think about your traditional management company of like a beach, rental, 20 years ago. Their metric is to come to you and say, Dan, it's April 1st and I got your place sold for the whole summer. And that was their vision of success. But that's not a revenue maximizing strategy, is it?
No, it's
So
not.
we teach how you can manage a short-term rental property. We just talked about pricing, how you're going to automate that pricing piece. The other is a tool called Hospitable, which automates your messaging. Actually, Airbnb has an automated messaging piece built in as well.
And what I love about that is you can customize each of these messages. So it's not the robot, hi, XYZ. You can really tailor it so it sounds like it's coming from you, the real person. And as you host, you have like standard messages, and then you start adding in one of my favorites is 24 hours after guests check in, they receive a message from us automatically through Hospitable. And it says, hey, we hope you're having a great time. Let us know if you need anything. And this does two things. One, guests feel like we really care about them, which we do. And like we get a thank you for checking in more often than not. And this is also an opportunity if something isn't perfect for you to get ahead of it. So the guest can say, actually, can't get the fireplace to work. And you can have someone fix that immediately for them during their stay, not after the stay in a review.
Yeah, it's I see what I'm paying in the management and it's expensive. And it's like, wow, we could be doing so much better on that. We opt not to do that, and we kind of took the hands-on approach for us. And again, ours is not like this great profitable kind of thing for us either. Um, but I don't necessarily see myself having the bandwidth and the time because I'm kind of busy running the business. But it is still this. It's a great service for me to pay for the manager because when the hurricane came, somebody was over there putting in all the furniture. Someone was driving. The roads were closed for 4 days, and they managed to like get somebody over there to put eyes on the property and make sure that it was still there and standing. And then another hurricane came a week later and hit the. I shouldn't laugh because a lot of people had major destruction. We didn't, so we were able to kind of chuckle it off. But the peace of mind to have the management company who's on the ground. I don't really know much about Florida. I don't have the contacts there. I don't have the the workers, the cleaners, the maintenance people, any of that kind of thing. Where for me, that was a service that's worth paying for. For somebody on the other side of the coin, where this is a portfolio, maybe this is a chance for us to touch on what a small portfolio, right? Because in real estate, the regular path to real estate is probably somewhere around 30 to 100 houses in the portfolio. It gives you some level of financial freedom. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of tax bills. That's a lot of insurance negotiations. I'm going to go out on a limb from my limited experience and say maybe there's a portfolio of short-term rentals in the 6 to 12 property range that could provide a level of financial freedom. Is that accurate?
Is obviously different for everybody else. But I felt when we hit 3, we were netting maybe $10,000-$12,000 a month. And that really was our core expenses, right? That's not every expense. That's not our private school tuition. That's not vacations. That was just kind of core groceries, mortgage, basics. So that was the first place that I felt some sense of financial freedom through short-term rentals. As few as 3. We're scaled to 10 and 11. Danielle wasn't always fully in the business. You didn't really kind of
No,
come
I
in.
exited a software company and we jumped in and started doing two
Probably
a
around
year.
8, you started, kind of jumping in and taking.
And we
part of
managed
the
a
reins.
portfolio. It will be of 11 starting Monday. And with all of the technical integrations, while it's some work, I think it's probably an hour of my day.
Yeah, we spend more time, thinking about the next place or the next renovation.
Working on podcasts, coaching people, all the fun stuff.
Yeah, I had to chuckle when you said 3 because I was doing the math on like the average house thing. It's like maybe that's $900 if nothing goes wrong per month, and you're talking about $10,000 plus. Obviously, this is with self-management, so we're not getting a 20% cut right off the top, and a much skinnier bull to go around if the professional management's in place. So how did you go about? Are all of your 10, 11 rentals, are they all in that same kind of reach? Can you drive to all of them in an hour radius, or do you guys now have them like 2 hours, 3 hours in each direction from your home?
So we have one in Turks and Caicos, so I can't drive there.
Yeah.
But the majority of them are in the same county. which is about a 2-hour drive from where we live. And then we did spread into a different county because I just fell in love with this wine area. I planned a girlfriend's 40th birthday, went to a winery and felt like we were in California. It was just beautiful. And I was like, we need to invest here. It's an emerging market. And
Yeah.
so we have our second coming online there Monday.
Is that also in Virginia? That
Yes.
that outlier of yours? Very cool. Yeah, I have a couple questions there, but I do want to touch on kind of do a sidebar. I think from the friends of mine who are very heavily into Airbnb short-term rentals like you, I I noticed they love to travel. My friends are, it's probably 50% about the financial freedom, and it's probably 50% at least about, oh, we get to go to our short-term rentals. We love it out here. We're going to block off 5 days. We're flying from Florida to North Carolina. I mean, the friend that I'm thinking of, he's traveling like 150 plus days a year to one of his short-term rentals, and he's got a lot of them, um, dozens and dozens and maybe hundreds under management. He actually helped me get mine. That's how I know him. He was a friend first, and then he kind of picked that one off. So, would you think that that is smart? Does the person who's getting into this, should they be a little bit oriented toward travel and enjoy that so that they're having that passion for delivering that experience? Or if someone's like, hey, it's just dollars and cents and it's just all about the money, like, do you feel like you're going to get the same satisfaction if you don't have the travel itch at some level to like care about this as sort of a hobby or a fun thing to do?
I think Danielle touched on it, a little earlier, which is, look, there's different strokes for different folks, right? If you are that person that just wants to have, be bi-coastal and, you've got a kid at college or you like to ski, and, then you can kind of spread out like that if that's really what scratches the itch for you. But, if we're just starting and systematically building a portfolio, I would start with, something close to home that has a market that pencils out with good numbers. And there are some economies of scale to be had. We are able to share a handyman across 5 or 6 properties. A couple of cleaners are shared across a couple of properties. And, you mentioned you don't have that plumber to call. We do sort of, in knowing a market, do have those resources, that team in place.
And going back to your question about traveling, we have clients who, they're selling a house, they need to move money, and they just wanted to buy something that will cash flow. It has nothing to do with them. Like we're advising a cabin. They're like,
Flat 1031 exchange.
Yeah, they're like, we don't like cabins. We're like, that doesn't really matter. If you're trying to make money in this market that they're looking at, it does. They're like, oh, look at this house. We're like, no one will rent that house. I mean, they will, but not for top dollar. On the flip side, people like us, like we love to travel. Talking about financial freedom and traveling, we were able to move our family to Athens, Greece for a year so we could do a family study abroad. So we were able to manage our portfolio remotely and learn a new language, meet amazing people, fly to Egypt for Thanksgiving, and let our kid understand what it's like to live in a totally different place with totally different governance and be a world citizen in 5th grade. So I get so much joy out of that. So I think there's so many different people and there's so many different ways to invest and be happy. You can be happy because you got your dollars and cents. You can be happy because you got your dollars and cents and the freedom. You can sort of mix and match it the way you would like to. And that's rare in a lot of other industries.
Yeah, and both of you seem to have that passion for the travel. That's why, I kind of wanted to touch on it. So did this other person who's doing the 1031 exchange, are they going to self-manage, and did they already close on that property? If so, how's that going for them?
They're under contract at the moment.
Okay.
So they ended up finding something that was a cabin, but basically in a neighborhood that had some more, amenities. So there was a community pool, a community gym, a golf course, right? So they were able to find sort of a hybrid where they didn't, they're like, we don't like bugs in the woods, so they found a community that is secluded, but is in a neighborhood with some sort of higher end amenities like the swimming pool and the golf course.
Yeah, we have clients that I would say 99% of our coaching clients self-manage because that's how you make the most money. But again, people have different goals. If you just want to buy an amazing beach house and have it cover its mortgage, you can do that. So whatever, setting your goal for what you want, what your achievement, what your level of satisfaction is at the beginning can then drive all of the decisions around what kind of short-term rental you invest in.
And will that client end up using that sometimes themselves? Is that some of the motivation for them to get that one, or was it a cash flow driven kind of thing?
Yeah, I
Cash
think it's
flow.
cash flow. Yeah,
Okay.
1031 and cash flow. The
All
real
right.
estate agents, and they just, they found a place that they are comfortable with, so they'll do a little
This
setup
is
there.
the least amount of work we have ever done in our entire lives to make the most amount of money. And that's incredibly attractive to people. That's how we never set out to be coaches, but friends were like, wait a second, what are you doing? How are you doing all this? Can you help me? Can you help my friend? Can you help my friend of a friend? And it's a replicable model nationally and internationally. We have clients in New Zealand, all over the place. So it's a really exciting way to impact people's lives.
Yeah, and I have two different directions here. First, I want to highlight the power of the concentration. So having, I don't know what you figure, 6, 7 properties in one county gives you the resources that then you feel confident to buy property number 2 because you have the handyman, the plumber, and a cleaning person. Of course, 3, 4, and 5 make sense. If you want to go to 25, now you're probably going to need another handyman and 2 more cleaners, and et cetera, et cetera. But and you're comfortable with the market. You understand how the seasons go. You know when it's going to be dead. You kind of know what you're getting into. Versus a mountain house and a beach house are going to operate completely different with their own set of nuances. So I love the concentration strategy in the one county. I want to
Yeah.
highlight that.
And really, you hit on the second part is the really powerful part. So, I teach people underwriting, underwriting a deal, and we're looking up numbers. And people ask me, well, how do you? I kind of don't have to underwrite, down to the penny. I don't actually, just being completely honest, because I know I own 6 houses, in this county, 3 in the same or 4 in the same neighborhood. I can look at it and tell you what it's going to make per month. Right. Because I know that market, like you said, the ins, the outs, the highs, the lows, what amenities people are looking for. I know that Danielle does a great job with design. I know that I've got a kick-ass photographer, and we know that operationally we're going to excel. So I don't have to actually pencil each deal. I can just say, okay, that is a good buy. It's got the amenities that we need. It's got a view. It's got a couple of unique factors to it. We can build the rest, and it's going to do $6,000-7,000 a month in gross.
It's something else I wanted to highlight. Occasionally, Airbnb gets a bad rap for like, oh, Airbnb is coming into our town. I grew up in a rural community in Pennsylvania where jobs were pretty scarce. You could work in the factory, you could drive a truck, or you had a farm. And Airbnbs bring in a huge influx of jobs. So I'm personally friends with some of our housekeepers, and they're like, this is amazing. I can be a stay-at-home mom. I work when, the turnovers are between 11 and 3. I can still pick my kids up from school, and it's making a massive difference in our family's ability to do things, save for school, etc. Same with our handy people. Like it's wonderful to go into a community being respectful and then be able to employ multiple people and sort of change the economic setting of opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're probably getting 2 to 3 cleanings per property, and this person may get what, 2 or 3 properties worth of cleaning. So we're talking like,
Oh, we turn 12 a month per
okay,
property.
oh, 12 per property.
Yeah.
Oh, so they're like almost a full-time person then.
In that little time period, though, between 11
Okay.
and 3.
Yeah. So they have a nice little tight part-time window, and they're making much better than part-time money that way.
Yeah.
Income growth. So since 2018, have you guys noticed fluctuations through that last 6-year period? Maybe it went down a little bit during COVID, but are you seeing, I don't know, 2 or 3% gross rental income growth as time goes on, like
So I'd
normal
say,
rents?
yeah, I'd say from like 2018 to 2020. So let's call it that pre-COVID era, there was, solid growth. They call it 20% a year.
Okay.
Just because people are discovering the Airbnb platform, right? Probably half of our guests are first-time users, right? So
Still,
there is
Wow.
plenty of runway, of people, defaulting to traveling with Airbnb. Then COVID hit and the market exploded, right? It didn't fall down. It went through the roof. It probably went up 50, 60%.
Hmm.
because people now are working from home and they're wanting to get, remember all the social distancing stuff, and we couldn't
Oh
do
yeah.
anything. We
Top
couldn't
of a
go
mountain is a
anywhere.
great place
We,
to social distance.
yeah, you're not going to take that Disney cruise that you'd saved up for. You're not going to fly to that all inclusive. A lot of that changed, well, on a short-term basis, changed, people's spending habits, and money just flooded into, for those 2 years, into Airbnb type properties. A lot of people got in. A lot of people never acquired the professional hosting skills. And so when demand started to normalize, a lot of those people are, kind of feeling the pinch and they're just breaking even. But it's still growing. We're back to a normal rate of, 15, 20% revenue, growth. But it's just not that crazy numbers that, it's kind of like the stock market, right? It was a huge boom, and now things are sort of normalizing back to that, like, S&P, 15% per year.
15% per year for anyone in the stock market would be, 2 to 3x.
Right.
If there's a business out there growing revenue at 15%, I mean, it's like Nvidia.
I talk to people a lot about Airbnb investing, especially people who are curious and wondering. And I like to describe it as an investment that I can wrap my brain and hands around. I understand the stock market, but not to the degree that I'm going to manage our portfolio. I pay someone to do that. However, I do understand buying a place, making it amazing, providing great guest customer service satisfaction, and I get joy out of the messages back saying this was the best experience. We didn't want to leave. Our son refused to do any of the activities because he didn't want to leave the teepee and the tree house and all that sort of thing. And
Nice.
so having an investment that you can see and touch and tangibly make better and that makes so much money is a really comfortable thing for me. It's not an abstract investment.
So a lot of people were doing the arbitrage model. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, you go rent a property from a landlord, you pay to outfit the property, and then you run it as a short-term rental. We have arbitrage versus ownership, and each comes with their own risks. Now, the ownership side comes with risk also, because if you select the wrong property, you'll have a hard time breaking even if you try to just simply resell it, and probably in most markets where it's penciling out, a hard time to cash flow as an ordinary rental, and you certainly aren't going to get the kind of returns you're going to get from a successful short-term rental. So, what is your advice to clients if somebody were to bring the arbitrage versus ownership question to you?
So Arbitrage is really becoming a property management company, right? And I don't know of many examples of it working, you know, at small scale, right? One or two. If you want to get into it and say, we're going to be a, corporate relocation business, or property management type business, arbitrage can work at scale, but it requires that scale. So I would tell somebody, if thinking about arbitrage, to maybe more think about co-hosting. And so co-hosting is where and Airbnb has just made this more prevalent on their platform, where, Dan, like you said, you don't have time to do it yourself, but maybe you realizing my property management company isn't keeping up with the things, the market, right? They're not, they're leaving money on the table. They're, maybe not, I'm getting complaints from guests that it's not as clean as it could be, or they didn't treat my guests the way I would have wanted to treat them. There's sort of the hybrid here is to find a co-host, and that's somebody who has these skills managing specifically short-term rental properties, and have them co-host with you.
And as a co-host, you can make 10 to 20% of the bottom line, which is not a small amount of money, especially because you could do multiple. Yeah. So you're basically getting paid to become an expert and then use that money to fund your first purchase.
It's the expertise that's missing.
Without the risk of the ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the flip side, though, I mean, the positives around the ownership side of the cycle. I mean, I know just from being in real estate for the 18 years or so that I've been in, the 2 to 3% inflation growth alone turns your mortgage payment into, I don't know if it's laughably small, but so much less significant than it is in year 1, year 2, and year 3.
Mhm.
And that's with rental growth rates of 2 to 3%. So if we're looking at rental growth rates of 10 to 15%, which maybe that continues for a period here for another, 5 to 10 years, who knows? That should make that mortgage payment look laughably insignificant over the time period of ownership, right?
And as Danielle was saying, being in and out of our properties, we're always making, so unlike a long-term rental, right? You get a lease, you lock in a price, someone's there for 12 months, and then they leave, and you got to go and clean up, and you've got all this deferred maintenance, right? So this is always, up and downs. With our places, we are making them showroom perfect every 3 days, right? So they're just getting better and polished and better and polished and adding small things and making small improvements. So we're really forcing that appreciation significantly.
And we're customer funding major appreciation when we add decks, saunas, that sort of thing into the properties.
Very cool. Before we get to our wrap up round of questions here, is there anything I just didn't have the foresight to ask that you feel like might be valuable to the listeners knowing what we talked about today?
I guess just understanding that where you place on an Airbnb search really matters, right? Views are the precursor to bookings, and placement is the precursor to views. So anybody out there that's got a place listed on Airbnb, go into incognito mode, search from some available dates and find out where you are and create a baseline from that. And now use that lens of what does the customer want? How do I create better customer satisfaction? And the other lens of how do I make more money for the algorithm, and start trying to move yourself up that list, right? So,
and if you get way into it, there's a software called RankBreeze that tracks that as well.
Love it.
So understanding the e-commerce piece is where, 95% of hosts go wrong.
Forgive my silence. I love taking notes during these episodes. Cool. Oh, you too. Nice. I love it. I love it. So what would be 1 or 2 books that you found maybe inspirational in your professional career? Maybe it has to do with real estate, maybe short-term rentals, maybe not. But what would 1 or 2 book recommendations look like?
I love Richest Man of Babylon.
That's a super short book. If you don't like to read, it's like a teeny tiny book. My brother even read it.
I read it years ago, and I don't recall a whole lot out of it. And it was it must have been 15 years ago when my mentor advised me to read that book.
Okay, yeah, go back to it. It's a fable, and it's sort of about life and finances.
This is not 100% life related, and it can be applied to short-term rentals. I love a book called Fascinate. It's by Sally Hogshead, and it's about understanding what makes you or your company, or I guess you could push it to Jeremy, what makes you fascinating? What makes your business fascinating? And once you understand that and can communicate it, other people are fascinated and want to engage with you or with your product or with your company. And I just loved that book.
I love it. It's on my bookshelf. I think I saw her speak. Again,
she's funny.
15 years ago or something like that. It's been a while. Great recommendations there. So if we could have the crown jewel of wisdom, meaning everything you know now in 2024, let's go back to 2018, and you're just starting back in the this space. What would you share with yourself then from everything you know now?
I mean, I think a lot of real estate investors are going to give the exact same answer, which is I'd have gone harder, faster, bought more then.
we experimented. We had long-term rentals that never performed the way we hoped they did. We had Cullen had a commercial building. And so I would have told us then to put it all into short-term rentals. And Cullen said, had he known what he knows now, we were actually just having this conversation a couple of days ago. He's like, I don't think I would ever have bought a house. I just would have put all the money into short-term rentals, and we could have just rented a nice place.
Right. Let your assets pay for your lifestyle.
Yeah. So does that mean you're going to go from 11 to 20 very quickly then?
No, because what we did do right. So our son at the time was like, a couple years old. And so we had a lot more time freedom. So, in hindsight, there was more time there and I probably could have bought a few more aggressively. But I think we've actually managed it really well over the years. We were kind of at a pace where we were doing 2 a year. And then, our family commitments, it was more
Our son
comfortable.
plays every sport under the sun and is a Boy Scout. And so our weekends are gone.
So then it became more comfortable to do 1 a year. And then we ended up taking a year off because it was his freshman year in high school, right? So, that's the part that we did well. We sort of managed our family needs and desires and marriage and parenting with the desire to grow the portfolio. The portfolio was doing well and we just didn't need to trade more dollars for,
Trade more time for more
precious,
dollars.
precious time, right?
Yeah,
He's an only child, so he'll be gone in a couple of years.
Yeah, and then
And
you'll
then-
And then we'll go
oh,
big
yeah. Watch out, world.
That's great. So before I ask my final question, do you have some contact information or website you'd like listeners to go to?
Absolutely. You can come see us at hostcoach.co. You can check out our podcast, The Host Coach Show, every Tuesday. They're under 20 minutes because that's my attention span. And they're aimed at anybody who's short-term rental curious in the middle of it. It's usually pretty fun and exciting.
Yeah, just drop us an email.
And up
Tate at
social media,
hostcoach.co.
Everything Host Coach is how you find us.
All right, great. So you guys can answer this together or individually, but what is the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you?
Ooh.
I thought about this as I appreciated having the forethought. The very first party I was ever invited to, someone I had just met, was my first week of sales training for selling copiers out of college. And this girl, Megan, was like, you should come to my party. And I went to her party and it was a luau. And she's like, hey, there's somebody I think you should meet. And long story short, I met this guy in a grass skirt, blue polo shirt. There's dry ice in his drink. It's just billowing smoke. And I'm like, he looks like a lot of fun. And 20 plus years later, he still is. So I think the kindest thing that someone's ever done for me was Megan Hirsch introducing us. And then incidentally, I introduced her to my cousin at our wedding. And so she's married and has my former maiden name.
Oh, sweet. So she's like family now.
She is 100% family
That's right.
now.
Well,
How about you, Culin?
I can't top that story.
Yeah, that's a tough one, huh?
Obviously the same event.
You did send her flowers
Right.
for introducing us. That was very sweet.
Cool. Well, hey, couple pages, 3 pages of notes here. I had a blast, learned a lot, and I appreciate you both coming on the show.
Our pleasure.
My pleasure.